Hi, welcome back to Books with Brandywine. This is the first Wednesday of January, and so it is our book review Wednesday. And for once, I actually have a singular book that's not part of a series. So the book I have for you guys today is The 21 Balloons, which I mentioned in a couple videos ago. It was on my TBR. It's a book that I read when I was in elementary school, and I loved it in elementary school, and I've been wanting to read it again. And as seems to be happening a lot with books that I've been rereading, I have mixed feelings about this book. I enjoyed it, but there were definitely things that bugged me about it. So I wouldn't give it a 5-star. I'd probably give it like a 3-star, which is rare for me. I don't know if I'll ever read it again. So I'll start with the pros, what I really loved about this book. So first of all, this book was written in 1941, I believe. 1947. So actually that will come into my commentary later for the cons. But for what I loved about it, it is very short. It is very fast. I read this book in the time it took my phone to fully recharge from 0 to 100%. So 2 or 3 hours maybe. It is a very, very fast read. The premise of the book is that this guy here was a teacher of arithmetic, not math, arithmetic, because it was in the 40s, so it's like really fancy. And he was sick to death of having to deal with humans. So he decided he was going to build a huge balloon with a tiny little house attached to it. Imagine Up, but with a very, like, a teensy tiny one-room little closet instead of like the big full house. And his plan was to float around the world for a full year. He had stocked enough food to be able to do it. And they even show, see if I can find a diagram of this house that he built. Because, so you can kind of see there, he built this little tiny house. I don't know if we can see it. And on top is where he would store all of his food and all of his supplies. And he built everything out of bamboo, so it'd be really, really light. And he didn't care where he went. He just wanted to float around and not have to deal with humans for an entire year. And so he sets out from San Francisco onto this journey. And they tell us the timeline, but I don't remember what it is. But within a week or two, I think, he ends up, probably almost 2 weeks or 3 weeks. He ends up flying over Krakatoa. Yes, the Krakatoa. That was the volcano that exploded in the 1800s and went from being one of the tallest mountains to being completely underwater when it was done exploding. That Krakatoa. So he starts to fly over Krakatoa, pre-volcanic eruption, and he ends up like a seagull, ends up getting a hole in his balloon, and so he crash lands on the island, and he finds out that the island is inhabited by 20 families. And he spends a few days with them, and then he's found later shipwrecked in the Atlantic Ocean with 21 balloons attached to this huge platform. And when he gets taken back to New York, they make the connection that he left a month earlier and had 1 balloon and is now showing up a month later with 20 balloons. And so he tells them in New York that he can't tell anyone his story, that he is an honorary member of this explorers club in San Francisco, and he has to tell them first what his story is. So there's a big to-do, the whole world wants to know his story. The president sends him on a train to San Francisco so he can tell his story. And that's the whole first, I want to say quarter of the book or third of the book is just him being found in the Atlantic and then being taken to San Francisco, and it's talking about all the preparations that San Francisco is doing to honor him as a hero and to celebrate that he has brought so much attention to the city, even though they have no idea what the story is he's going to tell and if it's even going to be a good story. And so that might also give you a little bit of idea of how much detail the author put into the story. The whole story is details, details, details. He describes everything. It takes him chapters to describe the celebration in San Francisco. It takes the entire book to describe everything that the guy saw for 3 days. He goes into excruciating detail. And so when this guy makes it to San Francisco, he gets set up in a bed and he tells to this huge auditorium of people the story of what happened to him in the month that he was on the ocean. And that's the whole rest of the story. And it's not written like a normal novel where we're like, you know, watching like the person go around or the person's having their thoughts in the head. It's him telling these people. And so it's written in that format of him talking to this audience of people. And so he's describing for this audience all these little details that he sees. And so that's why we're getting more details than you would typically find in a normal book. So it is a very fast adventure. It's not like a huge adventure. There's no like huge problem besides the fact that we all know Krakatoa erupted. And even the people in the book know that Krakatoa erupted when he's telling him this story, because they all saw that in the newspapers just like a few weeks earlier. So his audience knows Krakatoa has exploded. And so they're like, what's going to happen? And so the thing that I loved most about this book was also the thing that I remembered most about it from my childhood. And that was that this book, I feel, encourages invention. When he lands on this island and he meets these 20 families, the families were all chosen specifically for their creatism, for their ability to not get bored, I guess. And so they've been inventing things while they've been on this island for 7 years. And they invented a bed with a sheet that winds around so that, and goes through like a washer and a dryer. So they never have to make the bed again. It's just always got clean sheets. They've invented beds that go up through the roof so you can look at the stars. They've invented like just all kinds of different things. Like, he lists all the different inventions in detail. And so I did think that was a good thing about this book, is that I felt like it really encouraged invention. It makes you think, what kind of things could you do to improve your life? As he points out, some of the inventions were maybe a little bit too advanced. He wrote it in 1947, but it's taking place in like 1883 or something like that. And so they definitely have a very specific opinion about electricity, which we have now come to depend on. So that's what I liked about it. And I liked that it was fast paced, and I liked that it encouraged invention. What I didn't like about it. So it was written in 1947, which means it has the prejudices that were prominent in 1947. So they mention Native Americans briefly in this book, and they speak in the same way as Native Americans in movies from the 1940s. So, you think of all the old Westerns, that's how they talk and act and look and everything. When he comes in contact with the 20 families, he questions, because the whole island revolves around food. And that was actually another thing I really, really liked about it, because I love food. So the whole island revolves around food. And so he questions them, how are you able to have 20 different countries of food represented when you're all obviously look like Americans? And I'm like, what does an American look like? I mean, Americans are from every different country. But again, it was written in 1947. So he had a very specific idea of what Americans looked like back then. And then at the very end, there was a clown that popped up that again was very reminiscent of 1940s movies. So those parts did really bother me. I did not notice those when I read them when I was little, or if I did notice them, I had forgotten about them. And in the one way that's interesting to see how times have changed, like things like that get stuck in almost a time capsule in these books. If you're interested in ballooning and fantastical inventions and stuff like that, I would suggest reading it. It was a fast read. It was an interesting read. Not necessarily one of my favorite books. I don't like, it's weird because I love descriptions, but I think he just went a little too far into his descriptions. That being said, I've already made a 10-minute video of describing this book, so maybe I'm in good company there having a little bit too much description. But I gave it a 3 stars out of 5, and I will leave it up to you if you decide to read it or not. But there are diamonds, by the way, on Krakatoa. I will see you guys later.